Hello, everyone. This is JJ Richa with Pismo Ventures, and I have with me Grant Van Cleve. Grant is the chairman of TCA. I will give him the floor to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background. Um, for the moment, let me tell you a little bit about the program that we have today. The program is about an hour. After the introduction and then having Grant tell us a little bit about himself, we'll go into a fireside chat to talk about different things, including uh, the breadth and depth in the startup community. And this is something that Grant is really passionate about, and he's going to tell us all about it. You can ask questions throughout the entire program. We would recommend that you don't wait till the end and just go ahead and ask your questions along the way. If you have any questions that we don't get to, you're able to email me at pvinfo@pismoventures.com. And if there are any questions that are specific to Grant, I will forward to him for him to reply. Okay, so I wanted to tell you just that this program is very specific to helping our startup community by providing the right content to help entrepreneurs, startups in our ecosystem to understand what it takes to really start, grow, and build a company. Just a little bit about Pismo Ventures and what we do. We are a venture firm and a venture studio and also an accelerator as well with a software development arm. So what we do, we help our portfolio companies with their business needs, whatever it takes. We invest resources, cash, and services into our portfolio companies. We develop software, we facilitate funding, we help open doors so we could make sure that our portfolio companies are successful. We are building a fund this year. Hopefully by the end of this year, we'll have a fund to also invest in our startups. We are a hybrid cash and equity model, and we engage with our portfolio companies on a month-to-month basis. With the way we do our business, we become true partners with our portfolio companies. That's it. So Grant, you're on mute, but your picture is now much clearer because when we were testing earlier, it was garbled up. So it's very clear right now. Thank you for coming and welcome to our program. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Grant Van Cleve, live here in Orange County, been here kind of grew up going to elementary through high school around town, left for Europe for 20 years, and then in 2010 I moved back to Orange County. Been active in the venture world, long story of how I got into that, not where I expected to be, but I've had a great time investing in quite a few startups and seeing some great returns as well as some just impact through those companies.
Well, really good. And now you're the chairman of the board or the board of governors for TCA after being the president of Tech Los Angeles Orange County for a couple of years. And so before I get started, I want to make sure that I tell our audience to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're on it right now, so make sure you do subscribe. Also follow us on social media. The one thing I want to also mention to our audience is that there is a chat box in YouTube where you're at right now. It is the best way to post your comments or questions along the way. Again, thank you for being here, Grant. So before jumping into all the stuff we're going to talk about, tell us about, your unique roadmap of really getting here. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I mean, given my leadership roles and things at Tech Coast Angels, which you just mentioned, and the size of my portfolio with 77 different stakes and companies, people assume I came from an active angel or a venture capital background, or even just a tech entrepreneurship. But I came through a roundabout method. Good business pedigree, Wharton, getting prepped to take over the world, and ended up seeing my values changed, and ended up actually overseas in some nonprofit assignments for a number of years. But you can, there's a long story about that. But in the end, a couple of things became clear over the course of some years there. One is that one of the ways you impact an economy or a particular people that you're interested in helping, in this case it was the country of Albania in post-communist Eastern Europe, you can encourage them and train them and educate them and give them health care and give them spiritual foundations, and they can still have to emigrate and go flip hamburgers in Athens, Greece, even though they've got a law degree. And there's a way in which we can impact that country, I came to realize, was through business. And so this sort of something chomping at the bit inside of me of wanting to help companies, help people with their ideas, sort of incubate things, started to blossom in that nonprofit context, actually. So in addition to that, people helped me realize that the nonprofits, the charities, ministries that I helped get started, I was always at that incubatorial process. Get it going to a certain level and then pass it on, inspire people around an idea, build up a team, and then sort of flick them off the branch and head them out to do it themselves, and I'm on to something else. So they were like, so even when you did nonprofit, you were a catalyst, a startup guy, you were a convener of people, you were an inspirer around ideas, and you had enough of a head around your shoulders that they ran pretty efficiently and effectively, but you weren't a long-term operator. So add that to these movement towards business as a place of blessing, as a place of societal transformation, and before you knew it, I realized best way to help the world is through business, and the best way to for me within that business sector is to be a startup guy. So,
well, there you go. That's very, very interesting. Grant, I guess one thing we should start with is I know you're involved with so many things. You're on the board of many companies. You're chairing Tech Coast Angels. You have a VC Invest. You're part of Hangar 75. You're chairman of Buy It Installed. You're very, very involved in a lot of things. So tell us, maybe a quick summary about your current roles.
Sure. First of all, just for clarity, we've actually made a transition at Tech Coast Angels, and there's another fine fellow named Sergio out of San Diego who is, as we speak, the new chairman. So I'm sort of chairman emeritus, or vice chairman, the sort of immediate past chairman. So start with Tech Coast Angels. I joined that group in, I think, 2014. Was just sort of too dumb to know I should keep my mouth shut and observe for a while. Just started raising my hand, asking questions. Had a couple of companies that came through there that I knew had some domain expertise in. So I was like, I think we need to be looking this direction. And those ended up being some, years later, they ended up being some great exits. But even at that point, it generated some enthusiasm. Tech Coast Angels sort of had a little energy invigorated into it. It was kind of making an upswing post the Great Recession and kind of getting its feet again. But other people were volunteering and getting involved. But I think I had some role in helping add some energy into that system. So I dove in. I was between other gigs. The real estate I was doing in post-communist Eastern Europe was, barely creeping back up. It wasn't enough to keep me busy. I had helped a couple of businesses get rolling, but again, it was that startup phase. I was ready to hand it back. So I went in headfirst. And headfirst as an angel is sort of different. Some people, I think they've got skills and some background and they're busy, either still operating or maybe they're busy in retirement with things they've committed themselves, but want to sort of jump off occasionally. But there's a few, and I think you're one of those for sure, JJ, that just take it. We're trying to do this professionally. Now, it sounds arrogant to say because that makes it sound like we're great at it, but it's a statement saying we're going to be active at doing diligence on companies, on empowering them to get to the next level, get a combination of capital equity and sweat equity to, be a key part in seeing
Right.
the tide
Right.
rise. So Tech Coast Angels became a place where I put a lot of time. About half of my deals have come through Tech Coast Angels. The other half are through that thing, VC Invest. That's just sort of my outlet for my personal investments. And it got involved in leadership. So ran the Orange County chapter, chaired the whole group. We
Right.
gradually moved from about 250 to more than 450 members in these last few years. It's been a good, exciting run. So that's Tech Coast Angels. Buy it installed is one that might come up later as we talk a little bit more about depth. This is sort of in this breadth discussion, but one of those companies, is a truly multi-billion-dollar idea, and it was worth sort of coming off the bench and doing all one can to help it be all it can be. So that was kind of investor, board, chairman of the board, and then moving on to be CEO for a couple of years. So that stopped at the tail end of last year, moved back to a executive chairman role. Then the final thing would be Hangar 75. That's a new thing. Heard a bit about Pismo Ventures is also one of the great new things on the landscape here. I think Hangar 75 has some similarities, but some unique side of trying to catalyze ideas that maybe start out at the idea stage to fill a gap and then build a team and build a product around it, as opposed to the opposite. I'm super pro entrepreneur. I think most things, the great, successful society transforming things happen from some person with a great vision, ready to fall on the sword for it and commit all their expertise and max out their credit cards to go for it. But other times I think there's just great ideas need good execution. So we got an outlet for that with a great partner, a couple of partners actually now in that I think are going to also put Orange County on the map of building out some great companies that
That's what we're all trying to do, right? So
exactly.
is put Orange County on the map. There's a lot of great organizations, and TCA is definitely leading the way along with everybody else. So this is really great. I mean, I could tell you for a fact, Grant, that I do this because it's fun and I want to help, and not because of any other reason. So it's fun, it's great. I love the 0 to 1 concept and making things happen and making things start and grow.
You, JJ.
I'm sorry.
That's why I love you, man. It's good to you got your heart in the head in the right place.
That's right. Okay, so while we're talking about TCA and about your portfolio, I keep calling you, a super angel. So anybody who's got more than 70 investments, I think that's a super angel. That's somebody that's dedicated their time, energy to really help companies and grow. So what share of your deals? You talked a little bit about where it comes from, TCA or outside, but maybe let's talk about the breadth of what is breadth for you and why you're so passionate about the breadth.
Okay. Well, let's see if we can pick a couple of stories or metaphors to help understand. Or maybe actually start with the science. The science basically says that the broader your portfolio or the more things you've got into the pot, the better chance you're going to get at achieving, reasonable expected returns. And there can be in the 25% plus IRR in the angel space for the groups that are doing it well and that have access to good deal flow and good process. And Tech Coast Angels would be one of those who've got good data around that. But still, the better chance at those returns. There's somebody who just comes in, casts one bet, happens to like a deal, and it goes great. But there's too many on the other side where there's somebody who places 3-4 bets over the course of the years in companies, and if they don't pan out, then that creates this reputation that angel investing is more like gambling, and you're just not sure. And
Yeah.
as I said earlier about being professional, about trying to actually figure out how to do this well and produce quality results. that involves a willingness to diversify. And in order to diversify well, you need larger numbers. So that's where you got to get to 20 plus investments. So that sort of got me in that general role. But you also need to trust others. I don't know that, I gave that example of I knew a good bit about the multifamily real estate sector, which allowed me to get in 2 deals, partial pending and lease lock, that have both done really well. But there's also all sorts of, let's say, pharma or life science deals that I still, to this day, can't tell how much input it's going to take to get to phase 2 trials and why somebody buys something at phase 2 before it goes to market. But our crowd in San Diego knows that well, so I followed them into certain deals. And there's other people who've core members of Tech Coast Angels that are, or other parts of the ecosystem. Let's say Carrie Ransom or somebody comes and says, "Hey, I've got this thing brewing. I'm really excited about it for these reasons." Of course, it's a crapshoot at this stage, but it feels good, and I'm like, "All right, I'm in. I'll help you get a small seed round going to get that company to get to that next level."
Let's fuel it a little bit.
Yeah, you have to be willing to do that.
Yeah.
So for me, that's about let's say of the 77 companies, that'd be about 25. A third would be companies that I'm pretty passionately understanding about. I'm putting time in as board member, advisor. I just got that. I understand it. I can articulate it to others. I can even get others to join around. And then the middle third are ones that I studied a little bit further and get it. So I placed an informed bet, but I'm really basing it on others. And then a third are just that, that kind of life science side.
Which you don't understand anything about.
I still don't get it. Don't ask me. Don't pull up that list from LinkedIn of the companies I'm involved in. I mean, some of them, I'm a pretty good communicator, so I can give a good elevator speech on most of them. But there's some of them, like, I'm not going to tell you which ones, but it's a little tougher to describe why. But that breadth is important. And I think if you've got a portfolio or an amount you can invest, it's worth considering how you can do it with breadth. And that's also probably, which maybe you would have brought up, or maybe you've had other guests like Jim Pickell on, is why we've set up funds, is a way in which more investors can get in more deals. And if you can't write 77 standard angel checks, you want to get into a couple of funds that give you some breadth. But
no, that's true. So really, is this? I mean, let me ask you this: is this really the same as spray and pray?
Ooh, spray and pray. No, because I think there's a real difference between people. Some people who are just doing angel list syndicates, or some, as I kind of joke, an Iowa dentist who wants to get in on some California deal flow, or West Coast, so he joins Keiretsu and just does some virtual meetings. I mean, we're all now doing virtual meetings, but it's virtual meetings backed by some deeper involvement from people around it. So if you're really just spraying and praying, angel as a class I think it can compete with venture capital in other ways, but the secret really to angel investing is that it is smart people who do get involved, who do diligence, add some value, but know how to not get in the hair of tripping up the founders, and get that combination right. That's where we get those inordinate returns. So that's none of that spraying and praying. That's breadth with trusting some other angels.
So there's the really smart money behind it, because you're using your experience and your network to help these startups. Really, that's what it is.
Yep.
So I've got a bunch of questions already coming through. So let me get Paul here. Paul says, with 74 investments. That was 74 last week, Paul. This week it's 77. So we've grown from last week to this week. How many produced 10x or plus? How many completely fizzled? Just take a guess.
No, yeah, that's 77 investments, of which 15 of those have resolved themselves already. So that was 8 exits and 7 fizzles. So, and then The upsides I've had, of those 8, 3 of those were more than 15x. So it was a 16x, a 19x, and a 31x. So those are, I mean, get 3 of those, plus a couple of other. It's enough to, we kind of describe angel investing as you sort of dig a hole and then you're down in the hole, because mathematically you have to consider all of them a write-off. They're spending your money and that's their last money, and there may not be any future money, and there's no value created outside of, not enough to probably get your money back. So you have to consider it all a write-off, and then you kind of dig you're building steps to get yourself out of the hole. So thankfully, from those 8 exits so far, I'm more or less back to 0, and then I've got 60 more that can build that future value to get some positive IRR. But it was nice to get a couple of those that says, all right, this wasn't just crazy.
All right, so this is from Kevin Carr. Kevin says, are seed investors investing now?
Good question, Kevin. The answer is a qualified yes. So there's a sort of near to medium term where I think there's dry powder on the side. There's people that will be investing, looking for something, and it'll probably be at lower valuations. So it'll be harder to get those checks, but they're willing to write those checks. There are a few, seeds are investing in that triage work and helping their existing portfolio some. But we've got some real good stories. You read about them in the papers of some of the great companies of the last decade that emerged out of the last recession. We're already seeing some of that innovation showing up in life sciences and other things now, where just there's a retooling of the marketplace in certain ways, and there's going to be an opportunity for innovation to make money. And some people that were poised with things that they were excited about, but they just couldn't get traction in the market. Now the market's just dying to get a piece of them. So no, I think the seed money is considering investment. But at a macro level, there's definitely a second round of pause. You always get excited about it, and then you're trying to find if there's so many red flags you shouldn't write the check. But now you maybe do 2 rounds of that, or you slow the process down a little bit, or you're looking at your stock portfolio to find out, from the public markets, are you going to survive on that? Do you still feel like you had the allocation you had available to seeds? So, yeah, I've written some checks. We're looking actively at it. Our Tech Ghost Angels Orange County Fund has written checks and is deeply studying some others. So it's not,
I think we did 4 investments in the last 2 months. Correct. During the midst of the COVID-19. So yeah, there's investment, but I think the other side of it, Grant, is some people, their entire wealth is down by maybe 20, 30, 40%, and they're looking at it from maybe I'll do a little bit, but it's also changing maybe the way we look at companies and maybe the company's valuations. It's changing other things. Do you agree?
It is. Yeah, for sure. Been a part of a couple of internal rounds in companies where I had to do a down round, for sure, to get people to come off that hump. And I just consider that par for the course. I just think that's the way it works. And it's a little extra dilution, but that doesn't have to kill a long-term business plan. So there's no harm, no foul in that. But will there be some companies that are visionary and people aren't going to write that check to have them experiment at this time? Yeah. And that makes it a tougher time. There are going to be some who are going to need to go back to that day job and nurture this on the side. And there's going to be a few startups that weren't that great. And they were trying, and God bless them, but sorry.
It is what it is.
As Warren Buffett talks about the tide going out and find out who was swimming naked. There's some version of that, but that's okay.
All right, so this is a question from Brian, where he said he's in Santa Monica and gets training in Irvine too. So Grant, can you share a typical investment size?
My average is probably 35 to 40,000. So standard angel size would be 25, and then sometimes if you've got a group of you, you can get them to take a smaller check of 10,000 or 15,000. But I've gone as deep as 300,000 on a couple of things. So the average is probably higher than that. But in general, you're looking for finding an opportunity. When I said that, carry a ransom story, it's like, hey, we're looking for 6 guys to put 150,000 in to get it to some proof point. Okay, that's 6 times 25.
Yeah. So, I mean, a typical angel investment could be anywhere from 100 to maybe 500, and with syndications and everything else could be bigger, but that's about average. All right. So I got, our colleague, Phil Gill, is asking you a question. What do you look for in an investment most importantly?
Most important. So I got good top 5 lists there, but most important.
Well, do the 5. Let's do the 5. I think it's good.
Now I've been caught. Do I actually have the top 5?
Oh,
I'll tell you. I mean, absolutely important for entrepreneurship and for me would be grit. That ability to be
grit.
Yeah, to just go for it, to be all in, sacrificial, time-wise, just that true fall on the sword thing I think I mentioned earlier. Because, I mean, it's a slog. To create something out of nothing is, as we say, it's nothing short of divine, but it's also blood, sweat, and tears, and financial struggles, relational struggles. There's a lot to it, and you've got to have the wherewithal psychologically to just go for it. And keep at it.
So it's at the end of the day, it's really about the people. It's about the founders.
It is absolutely the character of the founders in that. So there'd be a grit side, but it would also be matched with, I'd put humility or teachability right up there too, of willingness to listen to
That's
advisors.
what we call coachability, right? Coachable or not.
Coachable or not. And, so that's part of, my side is wanting to be involved with them enough to actually provide some value. Ultimately, it's their company, and they're the ones that's got to stand or, sink or swim with it. But if they are coachable, then okay, I'd take a chance on them. If I take a chance on them, I'm going to make time available for them as well to be a part of that process. Sometimes it's lots of time, sometimes it's a little bit of time, but you really want to be pushing that. And that's where the diligence process comes in. You actually get to spend time with the founders, and you get or founding team and get an idea of those things. Can't figure out all of it, but certainly.
Just to tell you the truth, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, but, part of, what we're doing at Pismo Ventures is really spending more time with the entrepreneurs because, at Techos Angels, we're trying to make a decision very quickly. 30 days, make a decision, decide if we're going to invest or not. At Pismo, we're taking a little bit of a different approach and say, hey, we're going to work with you maybe for 3 months, maybe a little bit more to really understand who you are. Before that commitment happens. Because, I've been reading a lot about this, and I don't know if you agree with this. Sometimes it takes up to a year to really understand really the management team and what they do and how they operate and how they work with each other. And so it takes a while. And then so I'm convoluting the question a little bit, but then you end up seeing entrepreneurs come in and say, I need money. Can you give it to me in a couple of weeks? And I have this, and they're not understanding that there's a lot more to it than that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I started that with saying the entrepreneurship is hard, and you are creating something out of nothing. And if you're just replicating what exists, that's more like franchising, or that's some private equity play for a slight marginal impact in profitability on something or efficiencies operationally. That's a different ballgame. So there's going to be risk around what we're doing, and we're building that into it, and we've got to have a high upside to compensate for the high likelihood that something's going to fizzle out. So I'm okay with the fact that it takes a while on a certain level, but Going back to this Hangar 75 thing I mentioned, I think there are also times when somebody has a decent idea, but doesn't have any idea how to execute it, or has no idea. They talk about some product they do in some physical way, and they're going to make a digital version of that. The zeros and ones of how to deliver what they used to deliver some other way, and it sounds good. That could impact the market, but if they've actually never built a software product, never actually done digital marketing, and they've never done, there are plenty of times as I look back when we did a $500,000 round as Tech Ghost Angels, and they say the product will be ready in 6 months, and they come back in 9 months and say, good news, I only need 300,000 more. And you realize basically you blew your money. They tried to go learn how to build digital products on your dime. So that's where we're saying, actually, if we find a great idea of something that needs to happen, we'll build that for you, for the founder, for the company that needs it, just on our own dime to figure out how to do that. We think there's ways in which, that $500,000 investment could only be $300,000, and it could deliver on time and deliver something delightful. So as pro entrepreneur as I am, at times I think some of that problem is somewhat structural. You find somebody with an idea, you can reward them for the idea, but it doesn't mean they own a company forever that we claw back percentages as angels. They learn on our dime. So
that's a great. I agree with that, and I could say also that most of the companies that I see at TCA and at Pismo, they're sometimes they don't need the money yet. They need a lot of other things other than money, and so we're trying to help them in that direction as well. All right, so let me take a couple of questions here, and this is from Mehran. Should founders launch a just out of oven B2B startup and start marketing now? If so, how aggressively they should market it money-wise?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if we can sort of dissect some pieces of that. Okay, B2B startup is often is going to, we like those in general because you can end up with some recurring revenue out of them and some higher upside and customers that pay more and stay longer, don't churn as fast, a little more resistant to downturn in the economy. So you're choosing a good sector there. Should you start marketing now? If you're asking about that from a COVID perspective or a coronavirus season, obviously you're trimming back in some ways. You're not just experimenting with marketing, and you're holding back your reserves a little bit longer. Your investors don't want you to just sit on it. You obviously want to make progress in figuring it out, but you probably are slowing down the burn some. But on the other hand, if you're actually surviving during this era, if you've got some wherewithal, people like what you're doing, your market shares may be stable or even slightly increasing, there's an argument that says market significantly, or especially through press releases and things, create a perspective that you're going to get through this storm and are going to be, bursting forth on the other end of it, while others are flailing or wondering what to do, or just surviving off, PPP loans and just, in survival mode, trying to not drown. And you're saying, no, we've advanced our product and we're ready to take over the universe. Well, you do what it takes to create that reality in people's minds. So there'd be a value in some of that, but with caution.
Okay, all right. So he's following up with another question, which I think is important. He's saying, what a founder has to give up other than equity in return for investment?
Oh, that's a good question. So some part of this is just mathematical. You start with the equity and you give it up in exchange for, some gas to put in the motor to do it. If you're going to do it right, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. In general, there will tend to be, if you go to a proper angel investing group or you go to some smart people that are ready to gather around and help you along, you're going to give up some sense of governance, some sense of rights that you have to determine how it all works. A little bit of that is proportionate. If they, buy 20% of the equity and you have a 5-person board, they should get, 1/5 of those board seats. But sometimes it goes a little further than that. There's an occasional blocking right. There's an occasional, maybe sometimes they get more of the board, or maybe they might only have a proportionate amount of the board, but you need their buy-in in order to make certain decisions. So you're definitely giving up some control.
Yep.
But I think you're choosing to do that not just because they ask. There's some sense of, if that's the only offer on the table, you just got to do it. But I think they're also saying that partnership's going to be important here. We're not here to get in your way, but we do know a few things. We do know kind of how that mountain road traverses and what's going to come around the corner. And we just want to have you to need to stop and listen occasionally. If they're really there just to kind of take over the company and don't trust, you got to figure that out earlier and either come to a different deal or find another investor. But don't be worried about investors that want to get involved.
Yep. So this is from Paul again. So I think that comes back to the Hangar 75 versus pure investment. Do you tend to avoid virtual companies? Great idea, 100% contract manufacturing, clinical, regulatory, packaging, distribution, or does that matter really?
I would say that it doesn't matter per se one way or another. For me, it would be, I'd have to be studying that to find out if they were shrewd enough to know that you don't need a lot of infrastructure and there's smarter ways to do things than before, possibly that they'd done it before, if they had a strong rationale for it. But if it was just kind of a pie in the sky mentality, look, I don't need any money and I can figure it all out, I'll just trust others, and you don't have a knowledge of how to do that virtually or trusted partners you've worked with in the past, you can absolutely lose time, lose money, miss the chance. So I think, and that's a hard thing for us to discern that difference. But I would not throw it out by definition. In some cases, it would be a plus that somebody was able to do that.
Yeah. Oh. All right. So we talked a little bit about the breadth, so maybe a little bit about the depth. What forms does depth take? Is it board? Is it advisory? Is it leading deals? What is it?
Good question. So, I said earlier about 1/3 of the deals are just pure, diversification play. 1/3 are ones that I'm kind of following our general investment groups or the investment community around here and saying, the good deals, I get it, I've studied it, I'm in it. And then there's 1/3 that I'm digging in deep with. And so part of that depth is just something psychological inside where I'm saying that I'm committed to learn and to know and to actually play some role in the evolution, the refining of this idea and the maximizing of its potential. Could be because I know something, it could be because I know the founder or I've grown to like the founder. We've had some rapport, so it's more of a framework than any of the details. It's just saying this is something I have a chance to, either I believe in it more or I just feel like I've got a way that I can serve, I can help. So then what form that takes, so practically speaking, what it usually is I have joined a diligence committee on a deal. I end up saying to the founder afterwards, let's grab a cup of coffee. Over that cup of coffee, I'm asking other questions and trying to discern some of those things we talked about earlier. But some of it, I'm just trying to understand them as a person. This entrepreneurship adventure is such a pilgrimage, and it is human beings, humans, founders, human team members, that you really have to get everybody through that whole pilgrimage. And I want to get to know them as a person. So coming out of that, some people are creeped out that I'm wanting to know details about their life or just trying to ask questions maybe they're not getting elsewhere. And other times they come back and say, wow, that was refreshing. That was interesting. And they say, can we have lunch next week? And at lunch, they say, could I give you, a spot on here to be an advisor? And then sometimes those deals end up migrating. And sometimes it's a Tech Coast Angels deal where we are the deal leads. We've gathered that full $500,000 $1 million, and they give us a board seat. And then I have either as the head of diligence on that group or as the one that's built that rapport with the founder, this sort of negotiated, they say, could Grant have that board seat? You know, if it's one I believe in and have some time in my life, in my margin in life, I'll just say yes to that. Sometimes they're deals where I got to know the founder first and I'm actually bringing it through, and I've had that established relationship that's brewed from, you know, chatting at a cocktail reception after a talk about, you know, some part of startups or something over at the Cove or whatever it would be. I've gotten to know these guys and had those kind of conversations. Those things have evolved a little more organically. They're not pressure. So through those kind of process, especially in those 2014 to 2016, maybe 2017, I was very involved, and that's where I picked up most of those active board seats.
Okay.
Sometimes, you know, and one other factor, even outside of any of that, if it's a company that I got to know at some level in that diligence process, if the founder calls me, I am trying my best to get back to them on the phone, and even if it's just a 10-minute chat, find out what's going on, offer some insight. And, you know, I would always want such founders to be happy they took my check. It wasn't just something on the cap table to get the dollars. It wasn't just a reference that you had some TCA leader as your investor. It was actually somebody you could talk to. And
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, I think I don't know anyone at TCA that, regardless if we're investing in companies or not investing, we're happy to talk and help entrepreneurs in general, regardless. So just want to remind everybody, please, just ask your questions. There's a lot of knowledge here from Grant that we'd like to bring it out of him, and so ask your questions in the chat box. So I have a question from GP Fernando. He goes, I'm in San Diego working on a telehealth life science startup. What do investors expect in terms of timeline for a life science project exit? Are medical devices shorter than pharma? All right, so I know we know just enough to be dangerous, you and I, about this, but answer it as much as you can.
yeah, I feel for you wanting to know the answers to that, and I think my answers won't be as good as getting that from somebody from that crowd, which isn't just San Diego. Orange County has sort of medical track as well, and we do have insightful people. So we weren't trying to just have a dichotomy between San Diego and us. But I'm not going to be your specialist in that, partly because, as I said, I didn't even dig deep enough to know all the details, which is sort of cat's out of the bag. That 1/3 that's the diversification play, I might really be weak at. Overall, medical devices are faster than pharma because it depends on it, but a lot of medical devices have less regulatory requirements around them. Some of the deep invasive things can take a very, very long time. But you know, that's the privilege of both of those things, is that you've got big, large players in the space, most of whom develop their portfolio of tools in their toolkit, whether that's pharma or a medical device. They got them by acquiring from others. So if you've got a good idea and a good team and an understanding of that roadmap, you can absolutely get acquired earlier in that process. So, which is not the same for others. You've got to you're going to sell from multiple of your existing recurring revenue from clients who use your product and pay you for it. It's a faster and easier in software, but you've also got to go all the way before you get those exits. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's with pharma, it's just like any investment. It's highly risky, but highly rewarding at the end. So go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay, all right. We have a question from Mitchell. Any investments in cannabis? I mean, I don't know if TCA in general we've done any. How about you? Or I don't know.
So far, I have not done any investments in cannabis. And I have sort of a love-hate relationship with the sector. On the love side, I love that there's entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to do this. There's new real estate techniques. There's new people willing to get ahead of the curve even before full regulation comes. There's just some courage that's smacks of that entrepreneurial vigor that makes America great. So I love that. But then on the negative side, I'm just, for me, certainly have investors and people that would find it awkward to be in that space. And I don't know that I need to be on the leading edge of that if I'm not a particular proponent or an expert in it. And there's some chance that there is downsides, and the regulation is a good thing. So not sure, but then I go back, swing the other direction. I've got a whole bunch of people who are, sleeping for the first time or finally solved pain and things they haven't, and they are absolutely convinced that medical marijuana is, a game changer, and it's absolutely silly that we kept that from the public because the downside's not nearly as big as the upside. So I'm sort of cautiously on the sidelines still on that front.
So Mitchell says the LA fund invested in a software company working on cannabis. So it's software, not really cannabis.
Yeah.
There you go.
Ride sharing to deliver cannabis, I get it. And it may very well be a significant part of our society. I mean, I surprise myself that I'm in a couple of alcohol-oriented things. So not that I don't drink, but it's just I would have seen that on the, sort of do good while doing well, which would be one of my mantras and trying to insert my values into companies. I wouldn't think that helping people drink more was going to be better, but I Pour It, which helps create a social community around doing that, and Soma Bar, which adds restaurant revenue stream through diversification into cocktails. Those were actually creative technologies and, niche movement within the marketplace. So I was proud to be a core investing member of those. So who knows what cannabis will do in the future.
I don't know if you do you know this, but I'm the lead due diligence on I Pour It starting today.
Oh,
so
nice. Good team there. Really good team.
I know. Here's a question from Brian. How many board seats do you feel is your limit to be truly effective?
Well, my answer to that first of all, that's a very good question, Brian. I would not suggest people take their board seats lightly, and I would not suggest, overdoing it if you really can't serve the companies. And even for me, where I've had serious leadership roles in Tech Coast Angels, in Buy It Installed, it was really tough to say I can be faithful to those roles. But I've also discovered I'm a really good multitasker. And that's not to my credit. It's just that I can bounce between things. There's times I don't get it right. I'm sure could even be entrepreneurs of mine that are listening that have been frustrated with me and in a busier season in the last few months. But I can switch gears, I can jump into something, can study some subject that came up in our board, email discussion, weigh in reasonably well. I can set other things aside in order to have a half-day quarterly, board meeting on a particular company. Plus these things are sort of cyclical. There'll be times it's not even that monthly or quarterly. It's just occasionally it requires some deeper dive. I've got two other portfolio companies. One I'm the chair of. It's a deeper season right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a particular significant stake in it financially or sweat equity wise, but I'm like, okay, I'm there for them. It's going to take some time, but in between could have been months where you had very little contact. So I think if one has the capacity, breadth is okay on board roles.
All right, back to our esteemed colleague, Phil Gill. And Phil says, other than untrustworthy, what will most discourage you with an investment? That's a really good question. So
wow, Phil's good.
I know.
Phil was our Angel of the Year a year or two ago at Tech Coast Angels. Yeah. With a new member that dove in, is learning a lot, and daring to place bets at the same time as he's learning. So proud of Phil there. I guess, it would be sort of the flip side. Earlier I mentioned humility. So arrogance turns me off, which would translate to that uncoachability, would translate to not listening to, solid questions about the changes in the marketplace.
And there's that fine line between confidence and arrogance, right?
There is. And I mean, I woke up early. I was looking forward to sleeping in Saturday morning, but for whatever reason was up early and watched the Steve Jobs show. Because Aaron Sorkin written, and it's on Netflix available. Man, that guy was crazy. And he was arrogant as all heck. And he was right.
Yeah.
And it highlighted that, like, how dreadful to work with him. But I think even that is not, well, that was probably arrogance too. But the arrogance I'm thinking is that this people that just say, well, I'm the Steve Jobs of my space. And that's an excuse to just do a weak job on other fronts with team members, with investors, with clients, to actually, walk a mile in people's moccasins and get them to where they need to get is hard work. That leadership skills, that empathy. And so if you're just skipping that altogether and doing it in the name of saying that you're great and the world just needs to catch up with you, I think that's generally speaking, a pretty bad sign.
All right. Let's take Terry's question. What's the appetite for nonprofit advising and or funding at TCA? We have a for-profit spin-off coming in 2021, but it'll need the user data we acquire from the nonprofit. Is it too soon for TCA?
Well, those are tough questions because we intentionally at TCA have a fairly straightforward process of where we prefer people to go through the front door, not the back door. You're not waiting for somebody else to give you the thumbs up or thumbs down or become your best friend or agree to an advisory seat before you go to TCA. We just say go, apply online, let the pre-screen process find if you're reasonably tenable, go through the screening process. They're good folks. We'll add insight no matter what. So I'm actually hesitant to answer any questions like that in particular because I just say, trust the system. Personally, there's a couple of ingredients of what I just heard there that are interesting. I do like that nonprofit, for-profit sort of semi-blurry line there. I think the best nonprofits are doing what they do with efficiency and effectiveness that makes them, have things in common with business. And I think good business is imparting values and impacting lives through producing a win-win transaction in the marketplace. So I like that you could be doing something in the nonprofit which could migrate itself to a for-profit activity. So I like hearing that. So on that sense, personally, I think that would be interesting to hear at Tech Coast Angels at some point. It's creative enough that it could be interesting. Timing-wise in COVID, as JJ mentioned, we've funded from our fund things. There have been individual checks that have gone out. There's some sense that, a couple months from now, things could be closer to normal than we think. So you'd want to be doing that, to be in the process right now, to be part of that blossoming, the new era, the new normal spring in front of us that we're kind of seeing, literal spring. So yeah, don't hesitate.
All right. So Patrick has a question. Can you recommend a book or two for a novice entrepreneur?
I mean, I like most all of them. I mean, I learned myself as a novice angel by reading the novice entrepreneur books, your sort of lean startup methodologies and whatnot. But a couple of sort of off the beat ones. One would be just to do some of that leadership leaning in. Let's say Jim Collins type things, but even a Max Dupree, for example, has leadership as a jazz, leadership as an art. There's even one about leading without power, which is about nonprofit leadership. And as I read that again from an early stage entrepreneurial perspective, I realized there's a lot in common there about motivating people towards a cause, not just through salaries and things. So there's some good stuff, short books there. Another one, In some circles, everybody's read it. It's a first textbook. In other circles, they've never even heard of it. It's called Slicing the Pie. Another super short book that helps founders, teams, initial early investors understand how to divide up that pie fairly and in a way that allows the pie to grow. It's just foundational insights that in many cases just hadn't thought about it. Putting a framework to it would be worth reading.
All right, so we have just about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to take one question, Grant, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of time to come up with only one suggestions to entrepreneurs when I'm doing the wrap up. So here's the question. Our startup is a social enterprise. Our success is measured by our impact. We're told we're not a good fit for angel VC dollars. Any thoughts on how we might get the attention of impact-minded investors?
Good question, Anthony. And as somebody who is, interested in impact, both on the nonprofit side and through companies being impactful, I appreciate it and glad you're listening in on something like this. I say it to a lot of entrepreneurs, and even if it's not impact, let's just say you've got a good basic startup, a mom and pop business that's going to go somewhere, or you even get the accusation that you're a lifestyle business that can't be, doesn't have an exit potential. You're not investable. Well, you might be great. You might be right where you need to be and still using your creative juices and your insights and your courage and your God-given abilities to impact the world. It's just going to be a different thing. It's not investable by our standards. And the reason has to do going all the way back to that diversification statement, that if we are going to invest in things at an early enough stage with a high enough risk that, say, 2/3 of them wash out and don't make you money, that remaining third has to have enough of a multiple to carry the weight of itself and the two others that dropped out. So that's why when they say, show us a 10x, in many cases they're wanting to see a 20x, 30x, or more return. You just can't match that, and I don't think you need to feel bad about it. I think you have to say, okay, that's a different thing. Which is why there's a whole impact investing community. And I spend a little bit of time in it, less at the moment, because I'm just more inspired by this higher, not for financial reasons, I think it's just the sector I'm supposed to be spending time in at the moment, is these higher risk, higher return opportunities. But I've got a couple in the impact investing space, and it's just a different crowd. There's the social innovation gang out of Stanford. There's all sorts of innovation hubs in different places. There's even Orange County's coming up. Met a guy, Glenn Parrish, and his partner, Stephen Erkelen's recently, and they just got trying to create backing on the venture world that's created and the CEO leadership alliance that's being created for the bigger companies, trying to get an impact investing network here in Orange County started. So I can help you with a couple of those names, but I'm not going to be the specialist in exactly where to go.
So there is an organization called the Orange County Community Foundation. I'm actually helping them with they give grants to impact companies that are trying to create an impact in the community. So if you will look them up and maybe apply to their grants, that I think it happens once or twice a year, that may help. All right, Grant. So I'm gonna do a wrap up, but I'll give you time meanwhile to come up with only one suggestion that you think most important entrepreneurs should be doing. So before we wrap up, I just want to make sure that everybody subscribes to the YouTube channel you're on right now. Just click subscribe, follow us on social media. If you have any questions that we could not get through, please email it to pvinfo@pismoventures.com. We have really great programs for the remainder of May and June. I'll list some of them. We have Bill Carpu next week, Richard Sudek, Jeff Bocan, Dave Burkus, who's another super angel. So a lot of great programs coming up in the next few weeks. Make sure you tune in. All right, last word is for you, Grant.
think the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is to count the cost. There's a biblical reference to, like, nobody goes into a battle without counting the cost of what it's going to be. And there is a cost to entrepreneurship. And so I do want people to go in eyes wide open. But I also want to counter that with, when the cost is counted and it feels like it's right, it does require a jump. It does require courage. It does require that grit. And I think we too often land on the wrong side of one of those. We just flippantly go in and just say, woo, I'm along for the ride, but aren't even aware of those pitfalls and those personal cost and family cost and things, and making sure that, what it would take to get those stakeholders to come alongside you. But then there's others who, think they did that, and then they get going a little bit and they're like, oh my gosh, there's a cost. Of course there's a cost. All of the great things that transform society, they require that cost. It's not going to be easy, and it's not just, I read a book and I'm going to do the same thing in a sector. So don't fail on either side of those. Do the work of thinking it through, and then gather the courage, gather people around you that'll help you with that courage, gather a team, gather other stakeholders that are going to not let you give up easy.
Grant, I love this recommendation, because I think, we all get asked what it is, and I don't think I've heard it from many recommending that, look at the cost, and it's not about dollars, it's about everything around you. That's a real recommendation. Well, thank you for being here today. I appreciate your time and your leadership and everything you do for the community. Thank you for being here, and thank you for lending your knowledge and expertise to the listeners.
Thank you. It's been an honor. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. We will see you next week. Bye.